My husband asked me to choose between my promotion and him. And then he laughed in my boss's face. You think she deserves that raise? He said. 10 months later, everyone regretted that moment. My name's Callie. I'm 42 now, but at the time this all started, I was 40, living in Pittsburgh, and married to Malcolm, my husband of 16 years. We had a daughter, Nora, who was 14 when this happened. We lived in a small colonial house just off Fifth Avenue, one of those neighborhoods where people recognize you by your car more than your face. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. To most people, Malcolm and I probably looked like your average long-married couple. He worked in logistics, I worked in corporate insurance strategy. We had the kid, the backyard, the dog. But from the inside, our marriage was slowly rotting, and not from anything dramatic at first. Not cheating. Not torment. It was quieter than that. It was neglect, resentment, and the slow erosion of respect. Malcolm had lost his job during the pandemic, and while I helped as much as I could, resumes, references, networking, he just stopped trying after a while. He took a delivery gig for a few months, then decided it wasn't worth the wear on the car. Then came the excuses. His back hurt. No one was hiring men his age. The job market was rigged. Meanwhile, I was working 50 to 60-hour weeks, trying to keep our lives afloat. I didn't resent the work. I resented being alone in it. And Malcolm? He resented me. It started with small things. Passive-aggressive jabs about how I wasn't around as much. Snide comments when I'd dress up for a client meeting. He'd make jokes in front of our friends about me being the breadwinner, but they weren't really jokes. And I felt it, every time. Every comment chipped away a little more. But things escalated when Elise Tran, my boss at Fairway Mutual, told me she wanted to put me forward for a promotion. Not just any promotion, a regional director role. It was the kind of job people stay at one company for decades hoping to get. And it wasn't just about the money, although it came with a 40% raise and stock options. It was the principle. I'd been building toward this for 15 years. When I told Malcolm, his first reaction wasn't congratulations. It was, so, how much more time is that gonna take away from this house? I remember staring at him, waiting for the rest. Waiting for the smile, the just kidding. But it never came. He was serious. He genuinely saw my career, my progress, as a threat. He brought it up again and again over the following days. How I wouldn't be able to drive Nora to practice anymore. How he'd be forced to step up when he was already doing everything. He wasn't. He barely did the dishes. And then one night, a week before the final interview round, he sat me down and said it plain, you need to choose. The promotion, or this marriage. That was the night something in me shut off. Not like a light switch, more like a dimmer sliding all the way down. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just went quiet. I remember getting up, walking into the kitchen, and washing out my wine glass while he sat there staring at the back of my head. The next day, Elise asked me to come in early for a prep meeting before the final board interview. She was sharp and driven, the kind of woman who didn't just break glass ceilings, she stepped over the shards and kept moving. I admired her deeply. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. That morning, she said, they've got some questions, but I think you've got this. Just stay calm, don't undersell yourself. I was nervous, yes. But I was ready. What I wasn't ready for was what happened during the interview. We were sitting in a glass-walled conference room with two board members, Harold, who was old-school corporate, and Letitia, a newer board appointee who'd been watching my career. They were halfway through asking about team management styles when the door opened. And in walked Malcolm. He looked like he'd just come back from the grocery store, jeans, windbreaker, holding his phone like he'd been texting in the hallway. Everyone turned. Elise stood up. I'm sorry, this is a closed, he held up his hand. I just need 5 minutes. Just 5. No one knew what to do. I was frozen. I remember feeling my stomach drop like I'd just missed a step on a staircase. Malcolm looked at me, then at Elise, then the board members. "You really think she's ready for this role?" he said, smirking. "Because I live with her. I know what she's like. She can't even decide what to order for takeout without spiraling." "You really think she can run a department?" Silence. Elise didn't even look at him. She looked at me. And I saw it, something in her face. A flicker of pity. And then disappointment. Security showed up not long after and escorted him out, still half laughing like he'd just pulled off some hilarious prank. I didn't say a word for the rest of the interview. I didn't get the job. They didn't say it outright, of course. They said they were going in a different direction. But Elise told me privately, one of the board members raised concerns about your personal stability. Malcolm had made sure of that. I came home that night to Malcolm watching TV like nothing had happened. I sat across from him in the living room and just stared. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I didn't. I just said, "You really couldn't let me have this, could you?" He didn't even look away from the screen. I was just being honest. That was when I knew it was over. Not just the promotion. The marriage. The life I'd been clinging to for the sake of normalcy. For Nora. For the house, the routine, the comfort of familiarity. But comfort doesn't mean peace. And I hadn't had peace in years. I didn't leave that night. I wasn't ready. But I started planning. And everything changed. I didn't leave right away. I wasn't that kind of woman. I wasn't impulsive, or brave in the grab a duffel bag and walk out in the rain kind of way. But I was steady. I was methodical. And I knew that if I was going to get out of that marriage, I needed to be ready. Emotionally. Financially. Logistically. So, I gave myself a quiet, invisible deadline, 6 months. I didn't tell Malcolm. Of course I didn't. I just started pulling away. I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped defending my decisions. I stopped reacting. That might sound cruel, but when you've spent years shrinking to make someone else comfortable, silence can feel like the loudest revolution. At work, I kept my head down. Elise was gone by the end of that quarter, early retirement, though the rumor was she'd clashed with upper leadership over hiring decisions. I stayed. Mostly because I had to. The rejection had bruised me in places I didn't even know were soft. I didn't feel brave enough to jump. Not yet. Then came Nora. One night, she was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework while I made dinner. Malcolm was out, gone to a friend's poker night or something, one of the few places he still had a social life. And out of nowhere, Nora said, "You know, Dad's been really mean to you lately." I froze. Not because I didn't know it, but because I didn't realize she saw it. I turned off the burner and sat across from her. "What do you mean?" She didn't look up. Just kept writing in her notebook. "Like, the way he talks to you. It's not normal. It's not how people are supposed to be when they love each other." I swallowed hard. "Nora, has he said anything to you?" "No," she said quickly. "He's just cold. Like, it's always your fault. Even when it's not." I could have cried. I didn't. I stayed calm. But that moment? That was when my deadline moved up. Because it was no longer just about me. It was about what my daughter was learning from this house. The very next day, I dug through a drawer in my old desk at work and found a card Elise had given me months before she left. It was for a woman named Jaya Patel, head of hiring at Valor Tech, a growing tech firm in Chicago that was expanding its insurance compliance division. Elise had handed it to me with the words, "If you ever get tired of this place, call her." And so I did. I sent an email that night. Jaya responded the next morning. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Chicago for a long weekend interview trip. Officially, I told Malcolm it was a client training session. He didn't ask any questions. He barely looked up from the couch when I left. The difference in energy hit me the moment I walked into the ValorTech offices. It was sleek but not flashy. The people were young, sharp, focused, but warm. No one seemed buried in their titles or driven by power plays. They asked real questions. They cared about team culture. And they'd already researched me, my metrics, my projects, my management feedback. The offer came 3 days later. Remote flexibility, 6-figure salary, leadership role with actual influence. They didn't blink about my marital status. They didn't care about my personal situation. I cried when I got the email. Just a little. But it wasn't joy. It was relief. And then came the hard part, telling Nora. I sat her down one afternoon after school and told her everything: Chicago, the job, the plan to move. Her eyes widened at first, but she didn't panic. She asked thoughtful questions. She even got excited about having her own room in a new city. Then she asked the one question I'd been avoiding: is Dad coming with us? I shook my head. No, sweetheart. He's not. She was quiet. Then she said, good. I think you're better without him. It hit me how much she'd been holding inside. Kids always see more than we think. The next week, I printed out the ValorTech offer letter and left it on the kitchen table. Not for drama. Just for clarity. I wanted Malcolm to see, in writing, what I had been worth all along. He didn't say anything the first night. Just stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. But the next morning, over coffee, he looked up and asked, so this is it? You're leaving? I nodded. Yes. Nora and I are moving in June. His expression didn't shift. No anger. No sadness. Just emptiness. I realized in that moment that he'd been expecting this all along, but was too proud to admit it. He didn't beg. He didn't even argue. He just stood up, walked into the other room, and turned on the TV. That was it. For the next few weeks, we lived like ghosts under the same roof. I filed for divorce quietly, worked with a mediator to split assets, arranged everything so that there'd be no messy court battle. He agreed to everything. I think he was more embarrassed than anything else. Too ashamed to tell his family. Too bitter to fix it. The day Nora and I drove out of Pittsburgh, I didn't look back. Not at the house, not at the porch where I'd spent countless evenings sipping wine, not at the man standing on the front steps who barely managed to wave goodbye. We drove west, past the familiar, into something new. I remember Nora scrolling through a Spotify playlist, asking if it was okay to play music. I smiled and said, of course. Play whatever you want. That first week in Chicago, everything felt surreal. Our new apartment in Lakeview was smaller than the house, but brighter. Lighter. I set up my home office with a desk near the window. Nora decorated her room with posters and fairy lights and little sticky notes of things she wanted to do in the city. My first day at ValorTech, I logged into Zoom meetings with people who actually listened. They didn't question my leadership. They didn't care about my personal life. They just wanted results, and I gave them results. And then, a month into my new role, I got an email from someone at Fairway. The email came mid-afternoon on a Friday. One of those messages you don't expect and instinctively hover over before opening. The subject line read, just wanted to say, wow. It was from Letitia Gannon. One of the board members from Fairway. One of the people who'd been in that room when Malcolm walked in and detonated what was left of my credibility. Her message was short, almost awkward. Hi Callie, I know it's been a while, and I'm not sure if you remember me. I just saw your name mentioned in a compliance roundtable report ValorTech shared with our partners. I had no idea you'd transitioned there. Congrats on the move. I imagine that role suits you well. Honestly, I just wanted to say. I think we underestimated you. And I'm sorry for that. Letitia, I sat there for a full minute, just rereading it. It wasn't much, but it hit a place in me that I hadn't touched in months. That soft, bruised spot that still carried the shame of that interview day. A day that still lingered in the back of my mind, even though I'd rebuilt my life from the rubble of it. It wasn't an apology for what had happened. Not fully. But it was something. I replied with a polite thank you. Nothing more. Because truthfully, by that point, I was beginning to realize I didn't need validation from Fairway anymore. But it was still something. Around the same time, word started trickling back to me through former coworkers. The new regional director, the man they'd hired over me, was under internal investigation for financial misconduct. Something about misreported vendor expenses and undocumented spending on travel. Classic stuff. And yet, predictable. They'd passed me over because of instability. And look how stable their choice turned out to be. I won't lie. I felt a twinge of satisfaction. Maybe more than a twinge. But I didn't dwell on it. I didn't need to. I was too busy living a different life now. One where my worth wasn't tied to someone else's insecurity. Nora was thriving in Chicago. She made the soccer team. Made friends faster than I expected. Started calling me boss lady every time I had a late-night Zoom or led a training session. We had our routine, weeknight takeout, grocery runs to Jewel, weekend walks along the lake. She even convinced me to try deep dish pizza, though I'll always be a thin crust kind of girl. Malcolm, though? He didn't disappear entirely. He called on Nora's birthday. That was the first time I'd heard his voice in nearly 3 months. She put him on speaker, and I sat quietly at the table while they talked. He asked about school. She kept it polite but brief. Then he said, "So, your mom's still working those long hours?" Nora glanced at me, then said, "Yeah. She's slaughtering it." That was the first time I saw him rattle, even through a phone line. After the call, she handed the phone back to me. "He wants to talk to you." I took it. Said hello. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." I didn't respond. "I mean, I figured you'd leave." "But Chicago? Valor Tech? You really just moved on like it was nothing." Still, I said nothing. Then he said it. The words I didn't need, but never thought I'd hear. "I think I was wrong about you." I let that hang in the air. Then I said, "No, Malcolm. You weren't wrong about me. You just didn't want to see who I really was." He didn't call again for a while. After that, his presence in our lives became background noise. A few texts to Nora. A vague promise to visit that never materialized. He didn't fight the custody arrangement. Didn't ask for a revised schedule. I think he was more focused on saving face than rebuilding bridges. And me? I kept moving. Every now and then, I'd get little reminders of the life I left behind. An old friend would message me, saying, "You look so happy in Chicago," or "Saw the Valor Tech announcement, congrats." I'd see social media posts from Fairway's annual leadership summit. Same bland decor, same suits, same nervous smiles. None of it made me miss it. What did surprise me was how easy it became to breathe again. To make decisions without being second-guessed. To feel proud without being told I was arrogant. To wear a blazer to a meeting and not feel like I was being watched with suspicion. One morning in early spring, Nora and I were walking down Clark Street, picking up pastries from a cafe we'd discovered. She was telling me about a school project, something about local business interviews, and how she wanted to film a day in the life with me at work. I smiled and said, "You sure that won't be boring?" She looked at me, completely serious, and said, "No. I think it'll be cool. You're kinda my hero, you know?" I didn't know what to say. Just reached out and squeezed her hand. Because that's the thing no one tells you when you leave a marriage that's slowly strangling you. You don't just get your freedom back. You get your dignity. Your pride. Your ability to look your child in the eye and know you showed them what strength really looks like. I wasn't perfect. I didn't handle everything the right way, every time. I stayed too long. I quieted myself for too many years. I gave up too many dreams trying to protect a man who resented the very ambition he once found attractive in me. But I left. I built something new. And the world didn't end. It opened. A few months after that spring morning with Nora, something unexpected landed in my inbox. It was an invitation. 2025 Women in Risk and Leadership Conference, Chicago, Illinois, hosted by Valor Tech in partnership with the National Risk Management Association. And there it was, printed clearly in the email body, keynote speaker, Callie Mendez, Director of Compliance Strategy, Valor Tech. I stared at it, stunned. I had submitted a talk proposal half-heartedly months ago, something about navigating corporate risk culture while redefining leadership after personal adversity. I didn't expect much. But they'd selected it. Not just for a panel. For the keynote. My first instinct was disbelief. And then, this warm, slow-burning sense of arrival. Not just recognition. But redemption. Nora celebrated like I'd won an Oscar. She made me promise she could come to the conference with me. I want to hear your speech, she said. I want to see you on a stage like a total boss. So, I said yes. I spent weeks preparing. Not just for the speech, but for the moment. For the symbolic weight of it. And for what came next. Because as fate would have it, the conference guest list was public. And guess whose name I spotted on the list of attendees? Harold Keener. Board member. Fairway Mutual. Still hanging on. Not a speaker. Just a guest. But I recognized the name instantly. I smiled when I saw it. Not because I had any plans to confront him. Not directly. But because I knew, for the first time, I'd be walking into a room not to ask for permission, but to stand in the spotlight. The day of the keynote came. The ballroom was packed, industry leaders, old colleagues, new faces. Nora sat in the third row with a notebook in her lap like a proud intern. And I told my story. Not in a petty way. I didn't name names. I didn't air dirty laundry. But I told the truth. I spoke about how women are often expected to prove themselves twice, once through their work, and again through the performance of humility. How ambition gets mistaken for arrogance. How personal lives are weaponized against professional capability. How sometimes the biggest risk we take isn't in the boardroom, it's in choosing ourselves. I shared how I had once been forced to choose between a marriage and a promotion, and how I ended up choosing neither. I chose me. My daughter. Our peace. And how that single decision led me to a place where I no longer had to ask if I deserved the room I was in. When I finished, the applause was overwhelming. I wasn't prepared for how emotional it would be, how deeply it hit me that people were listening for once. That I had taken something humiliating and made it into something whole. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. Compliments. Business cards. Some even shared their own stories, quietly, with gratitude. And then, I saw him. Harold. Still in a pressed suit, still with that polite, vaguely detached look of someone who thinks they've already seen everything there is to see. But he was watching me. Really watching. We locked eyes for a moment. I saw a flicker of recognition. And I could tell, he remembered. Maybe not the whole thing. Maybe not Malcolm's face. But he remembered me. The woman in the interview who suddenly looked unstable. He didn't approach me. Just gave me a nod. The kind of nod men like him give when they realize they bet on the wrong horse, and it's too late to change the race. That was enough. But the final twist? That came a week later. Valor Tech had just closed a major merger with a mid-size insurance network on the East Coast. As part of the integration, I was asked to review key leadership from the acquired partner company. Imagine my face when I opened the internal transfer documents and saw the name Malcolm D. Reeves. Assistant Logistics Coordinator. Level 2. Not high up. But not invisible. Apparently, after I left, he took a job with a shipping firm that recently merged into Valortech's operations arm. His department now reported, through a dotted line, to mine. The irony was almost comical. I didn't reach out. I didn't email. I didn't say a word. But I knew. And more importantly, he knew. Because corporate restructuring meant that everyone received access to the new org chart. And there it was, plain as day. His name, buried in operations. And mine, near the top of the tree. A week later, he requested a transfer. Out of the Chicago network. HR flagged it as personal reasons. I didn't stop it. I didn't need to. My work was already done. That was the most satisfying part. Not revenge by fire. Not chaos. Just, quiet, inescapable accountability. I didn't ruin him. I didn't try. I just outgrew him. And the world put us exactly where we belonged. Now, I live a life that fits me. Nora's applying to colleges. She wants to study behavioral psychology and leadership studies. She told me once, I want to help people get unstuck. Like you did. And me? I still keep that fareway offer letter in a drawer. The one I never got to sign. Next to it, I keep the Valortech badge from my keynote speech. Sometimes, you don't get justice in the way you imagine. Sometimes, justice is quiet. It's slow. It comes without a sound. But when it arrives, it feels like peace.